If for some reason notifications are not working on your Church One app, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and have your notifications on YouTube. I'm not saying the YouTube notifications are great, but a lot of times you will get a notification when we go live on YouTube as well. All right, so just keep that in mind. That's a way to at least get a notification. And hang on, let me go here, checking that. All right, going to YouTube, going to Theology Central. I was monitoring that for a while. I was monitoring it for a while, and it was working pretty good. So if you subscribe to us on YouTube, you should get a YouTube notification. If you hit that bell and hit subscribe or whatever YouTubers say, all right, if you do that, you should be able to get our notifications on YouTube. And hopefully they'll figure out the Church One situation for some people. And yeah, those are ways. I was thinking of another way to get notifications, but those are the two best ways to get notification. At this current time, I'm still hoping someday they allow notifications on the Sermon Audio app. Then there would be 3 different ways to get notifications. But we will see. Oh, and just remember, if you do not subscribe to us on the Spotify app, please consider subscribing on the Spotify app. Give us a 5-star rating and maybe listen and download some episodes on Spotify, because we had a massive increase in Spotify this week. I'm still trying to figure out what happened. I think we've almost had 2,000 downloads on Spotify alone in a 24-hour period. So I like to build on that momentum if possible. And yeah, I think that's great. This week, it's been weird. The 2 platforms where we've had more downloads and more streams this week have been SiriusXM satellite radio / SiriusXM app on the SiriusXM app, and on Spotify. They surpassed Apple Podcasting. All the other podcasting apps got pushed down, and SiriusXM and Spotify are number 1 and number 2. I don't know what is going on there. That is fascinating to me, but hey, that's wonderful. That's great. And but I still want to, everyone knows why I want to build on the Spotify momentum. I still want to get us on the Spotify podcasting chart, but I don't think we can. It's very difficult. But if you look at the things on the Spotify religion and spirituality chart, there's some questionable things. Okay, so yeah, I wish we could be in the mix there. I guess I should say in the midst of them. We could just have a presence there. I'm not saying that people would like us, but at least we could be offering an alternative perspective, right? I mean, at least to be seen. I mean, that's the most difficult thing with podcasting of any kind. How do people discover your content? How? And that's why we've been doing the Sermon Audio Daily, because how do people discover content? So yeah. All right. I think we're good. This is not the perfect time for this episode. I wanted these episodes to be done at very specific times, but it's what's going to happen. And if you're looking at the Sermon Audio app right now, you already know, I don't know, there's probably already 300, 500, 600 webcasts currently underway. And just always remember, Sundays and Wednesdays are busy times for the Sermon Audio app. So if you're ever just, you don't know what to do, you don't know what to listen to, open up the Sermon Audio app. You're going to have your, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of webcasts to watch and choose from. All right. With all that said, hopefully you're listening to me. Hopefully you're listening to mine. All right. In fact, let's take a look. Well, a couple of people are listening. Just a couple. All right. Not very, because you know why? We're going to get buried. In fact, if you go to the Sermon Audio website right now and just take a look, I'm going to go to Webcast. I'm going to go to Webcast right now. There are currently 124 webcasts, 124 as I speak, and that number is about to increase by a couple of hundred within a couple of minutes. So right now, if you're following us, if you follow us on the Sermon Audio app, our webcast will show up at the top under the following tab, right? But if you don't follow us, we're buried somewhere in that stack of webcast. All right. So, yeah. And all of them are not loading for some weird reason right now. So that's weird. Yeah. We're up to 125. It's probably going to be hard to even keep them all ready to go. So, all right, but that's happening. Yeah, I think we're getting buried even in the ones I follow. We're just getting buried, okay? All right, follow us. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, you ready? Let's do this. Hang on. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, October the 8th. Yes, it is October the 8th. I almost said October the 6th. Good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, October the 8th, 2025. It is currently 6:04 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, we have begun a series that I am calling the Theology of Tears when the Psalms weep. The Theology of Tears when the Psalms weep. And we've done one broadcast so far that we have called the Mapping the Tears in the Psalms. Mapping the Tears in the Psalms. We've done part 1, and tonight's going to be Mapping the Tears in the Psalms part 2. Now, I've struggled here a little bit. Let me try to explain. On one hand, I want to capture the emotion here, right? I really want to capture the emotion, but part 1 and part 2, maybe, well, going on to part 3, maybe even part 4, these are very much more academic. We are mapping the tears in the Psalms, and that's done in a very methodical, tedious way. We're going through every verse that mentions tears, weeping, crying, sorrow, crying out. And we're just making a map of all of them so that you will have your own map of all the tears in the book of Psalms. All right. And the reason we're going to do that is so that we have the map. Then we're going to follow the map and go through the different passages that talk about tears, crying, sorrow, that type of thing. And then try to just understand them exegetically, theologically, understand the significance of it. And I think where we're going is going to be very powerful and emotional. But I tried to capture that emotion at the beginning of part 1. But now when we come into part 2, do I just try to go back and restate that emotion? I feel like part 2, we just need to dig into the actual mapping out of the text, but I feel like it loses something. So I was very much like, okay, what's the perfect time to do these episodes, right? They kind of feel like a kind of a late night feeling, but the mapping out can be done at any time. I don't know. I've not quite got it all figured out. In fact, I don't even like the way I've done this introduction, but that's okay. That's okay because Maybe this is the best way to describe this, as imperfect as this introduction has been, as not quite mapped out and didn't flow perfectly and it just didn't work right. Just as my introduction hasn't been perfect, it hasn't been mapped out perfectly, it hasn't flowed perfectly, it's been imperfect in every way. Life is very, 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 very imperfect. Life doesn't always work the way you want to. Things don't always go as you plan. Sometimes your best intentions still lead to catastrophic consequences. Things don't always go right. And because life is imperfect, because things don't work right, you find yourself many times in the midst of pain, sorrow, discouragement, depression, frustration, just wanting to give up, crying out. And that fits perfectly because I think the tears in the Psalms reflect the reality of life. Now, there's a lot about the tears in Psalms that confound me and confuse me. I'm just going to be honest with you. When I read all of these passages about the tears in the Psalms, I have some basic theological and philosophical questions that I just want to scream at the top of my lungs. And before we're done with this series on the Theology of Tears, you're going to hear me scream it out probably many times, and many of you may know what I'm going to scream out. I haven't tried to scream it out yet, but trust me, it's inside of me. When I see the tears in the Psalms, I get a feeling like, you know what? I know, I understand, because that's how life works. Sometimes our tears can just reflect a frustration, exhaustion, stress, anxiety, worry. Sometimes our tears can express great amounts of pain and tragedy and death and sorrow. Tears can reflect a wide range of emotion. And the Psalms captures all of that. In fact, I started part one with saying the Psalms bleed. The Psalms bleed. In fact, my exact words, I went on to say this: between their hallelujahs, between their hymns, you can hear it. You can hear the sound of weeping. The pages of the Psalms, in a sense, if you'll just think about it, they feel kind of damp. The songs that comfort us most in the Psalms were written by people who could barely breathe through their own sorrow. When we turn to the Psalms and our own pain, what we find there are not polished devotions, but tears. But sometimes I think the church polishes them up and just tries to make it sound like so wonderful and beneficial. But I think there's pain there that sometimes it's overlooked. And I don't believe the tears in the Psalms are wasted. I think they are visible proof of the reality of life. Now, I did not say that yesterday, but I'll say it today. The tears in the Psalms is visible proof of the reality of life. Life is imperfect. Life does not go the way we plan. Pain, suffering, difficulty, stress, frustration. That's just the reality of life. Some people experience more. Some people may experience less for countless reasons. We won't even get into the sovereignty of God at this point, but that will obviously is going to come into play at some point. But it's visible proof of the reality of life. But maybe it's also visible proof that faith exists in the dark. Faith walks through the dark, the pain, the sorrow. The tears is not proof of the absence of faith. Tears exist in the midst of faith. Faith exists in the midst of tears. They are, if we think of this, the tears are prayers that fall instead of speak. The tears are the prayers. The tears are the lament. The tears are theology written in anguish. And I want to go through the Psalms, and I want to look at every place where tears are found. Every time there's weeping, crying. I really want us to go through this, but see, I could just jump to those individual passages, do some kind of little devotional, try to make it somehow positive and nice and encouraging. First, that would not be this program in any way, shape, or form. And second, it goes against everything that I believe and think. And third, it would just be disingenuous and false and fraudulent. Because it's not that easy. The tears should make us uncomfortable and should raise some very difficult theological and philosophical questions. So my imperfect introduction serves well because it's just another piece of evidence of how imperfect life can be. And the imperfection of life is a great source of pain and difficulty because that imperfection can manifest itself in small ways or giant ways, and it can lead to pain and suffering. So before we can dig into these individual texts, we have to create a map. All right? I told you to get a journal. You can call it the Psalms Bleed. You can call it your map of tears, the Trail of Tears, whatever you want to call this particular journal. And the first part of your map, we're calling it literal tears because I've taken all the tears in the Psalms and I've put them into individual categories. The first one is literal tears. Literal tears. These are passages that explicitly mention tears.
And these tears are the visible outpouring of sorrow, sometimes connected to suffering, sometimes connected to sin, sometimes connected to exile, sometimes connected to prayer. But these are literal tears. Now, this is very important. In these passages that I gave you yesterday under the literal tears section, it's referring to literal tears, but it may describe it in a very poetic way. So just because something is wrapped in poetry does not mean that it's not referring to something literal. It's taking a literal tears and describing it in a poetic way, but it's still literal tears that's being discussed, if that makes sense. Now, I'll quickly remind you of the passages. I gave you Psalm chapter 6, verse 6. I'm not going to read them again. I'm not going to give you the summary again. Psalm 6:6, Psalm 39:12, Psalm 42:3, Psalm 56:8, Psalm 80 verse 5, Psalm 116 verse 8, Psalm 126 verses 5 through 6. All right? Now, today, I'm going to have to make this next section somewhat short, or I'm going to have to make this episode somewhat short because the next section is relatively short. But to go into the third section, it's very long. So then the third section would be broken up into 2 different episodes. And I want to try to get each section its own episode. All right. But section 2 for our map of tears, we're going to call it weeping. The first one is literal tears. This is weeping. This is the human response to distress. The first one was literal tears. This one we're just going to describe as weeping, and we're going to describe it as human response to distress. When we're in distress, no matter what level of that distress is, different people respond different ways, but many will respond with weeping. These verses use weep, weeping, and wept. These verses are going to use the term. The other ones talked about literal tears, use the word literally. These verses are going to use the term weep, weeping, or wept. And they're going to be used to describe human grief. Sometimes individual grief, sometimes communal grief, or the grief of a group of people. All right? Now remember, there'll be some overlap between the verses with tears and the verses with weeping, because sometimes the verse will use tears and the word weeping or wept in the same verse. But we'll place them in both categories. So we have literal tears. Now we have weeping. And the first one is Psalm chapter 30. Psalm chapter 30, verse 5. Psalm chapter 30, verse 5, we read this. For his anger endureth but a moment. In his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. For his anger endureth but a moment, in his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Now this seems to put forth temporary sorrow versus maybe enduring joy. Now, we got a lot to understand there. We got a lot to figure out. But there's weeping. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. Weeping may be there and it may last the night. It may be there for a night. And I think that's the idea for maybe a shorter period of time, but then joy is, enduring. It's gonna start and last. And well, how do you understand it? Does the night represent this life? Does the morning represent eternity? Or do we take it in a more literal way? I mean, there's a lot we could do with that. And when we go through it, we will. But that's Psalm chapter 30, verse 5. One more time. For his anger endureth but a moment, and his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Oh, there's a lot we could take apart there. Okay, I can't preach these right now. I can't exegete these right now. All right, the second one. Now, you should be very familiar with the second one because we placed it in the first category of literal tears. That's Psalm 6:6. I am weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. And then I'm weary with my groanings, depending on the translations here, we have, I water my couch with my tears. Some translations, like the ESV, my couch with my weeping. So I just wanted to ensure that I place this in both categories because depending on your translation, some will use Psalm 6:6 and use the word tears. I water my couch with my tears. Others will have it with water my couch with weeping. So I wanted to ensure it showed up. And I can't do that with every single translation, but I'm trying to check with a number of them just to make sure we get them all within a category. All right. So we've already talked about this one. I mean, it's talking about literal weeping, literal crying, but it's doing it in a very poetic way. I am weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. I mean, that's pouring out some emotion. Now, why? Why is there such emotion? We could get into that. Next is Psalm 69. Psalm 69, verse 10. Psalm 69, verse 10, we read these words, when I wept and chastened my soul with fasting, that was to my reproach. When I wept and chastened my soul with fasting, that was to my reproach. Another translation has it this way, when I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. Now, what is going on there? When I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. Oh, there's a lot of questions I have for that verse. That I want to dig into that right now. Is this a mockery of piety? What is going on here? What we could get into that. So the first one is Psalm 30 verse 5. The second one is Psalm 6:6, which we've already read. Remember, it's either at my couch with my weeping or with my tears. Psalm 69:10, when I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. And then next, Psalm 102. Psalm 102. Psalm 102, and look at verse 9. Psalm 102, verse 9. For I have eaten ashes like bread and mingled my drink with weeping. Let me read that again. Psalm 102, 9. For I have eaten ashes like bread and mingled my drink with weeping. Now, the very next verse says because, but I'm not going to read that right now because we're not exegeting. We're just mapping. For I've eaten ashes like bread and mingled my drink with weeping. All right. Definitely has, I think, the language of a lament. Definitely has an imagery of mourning, maybe a little kind of an idea of, I won't say anymore. I don't want to give away too much here. All right. Psalm 126. Psalm 126:6. Psalm 126:6, you know this verse very well. Psalm 126:6. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. Psalm 126:6. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. This seems to be kind of an anticipation of some kind of a joyful harvest. Once again, it shows sorrow transformed. And if you think about this, we have weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. That's the first where we have weeping or wept, right? Or weeping or wept. These are the verses that have that. And the first one is Psalm 30 verse 5. Weeping may tarry. If I can go back to where it was. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. So that's how it begins. And it kind of shows that temporary sorrow, enduring joy, that the weeping is here, but it's going to change. And then the last verse that mentions weeping or wept or any of those variations is Psalm 126:6, which has the same kind of concept. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. This is the anticipation of a joyful harvest or sorrow being transformed. So when it comes to the weeping verses, the first one and the last one mentioned in the Psalms does give this anticipation of transformation or of hope. There is hope. Now, I don't know how you feel about that hope. I don't know. I don't know if it helps you in times of weeping and pain and sorrow. I don't know. Because everyone should be able to at least acknowledge this, all right? Scripture obviously demonstrates and describes life itself as being filled with pain, sorrow, difficult, sin, failure, imperfection. That's just a fact. The Bible clearly makes that clear. Now, I know Christianity's response to that is, hey, life is like this, but if you'll get saved, dun, 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 it will be like this. No, not when you get to eternity, here and now. And so Christianity sells you the concept of power. Hey, you feel powerless, you feel weak, you feel helpless, become a Christian. Dun, 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 you get power, and now you'll go from helpless to victorious. You'll go from weak to strength. You'll go from imperfection to basically perfection. You'll go from sinning to basically stop sinning. And Christianity sells itself on offering hope, not for eternity, but for the present. And even if churches try to push back and say, no, we don't, yes, you do. Your marketing campaign is get saved, and you may be in a dark place. It may be painful. You may be weeping, but joy will come the minute you put your faith in Jesus Christ. And then he will do this, and he will help you here, and he will assist you here, and he will pick you up, and he will carry you, and he will fix this, and all of these promises that we apply to the now. The same theology, it's the same theology of the charismatic, right? We do believe, I think biblically, that healing is guaranteed in the atonement of Christ, right? There is a guarantee for healing. When is that healing going to take place? When we reach glory and we get a new body and there's no more pain, no more suffering, no more death, and no more tears. So there is, in the atonement, there is the promise of ultimate healing because you're going to get a glorified body, no more pain, no more sickness, no more death. But charismatics say, no. There's healing in the atonement, but it's guaranteed for here and now. Put your faith in Jesus and you can have healing now. It's not if it's his will, it is his will. Claim it, name it, proclaim it, testify it, confess it. So your tears can go away now. Basically, charismatics almost teach, even though they may not want to take it this far, but if they were being honest with their theology, that basically you can have no more tears, pain, and sorrow right now. That there should be no more pain, suffering, and death now because healing is guaranteed in the atonement now. So that what is anyone dying from? What is anyone crying over? There should be no more pain. There should be no more suffering. They want the promise of heaven placed here on earth. Charismatics do it, and every other church does it. Because basically the idea if you get saved, I mean, it's basically they will always try to make, well, we're not saying you can be perfect, but they describe it as you can basically be perfect, almost like the eradication of the old nature. God is going to help you. God is going to sustain you. God's going to do all this for you. And and I think those promises in many cases are for eternity, and they bring them to the here and now. Well, then you get saved, you walk the here and now, and guess what happens? You get sick, you get diseases, people suffer, people die, there's pain, there's suffering, there's depression, relationships fall apart, you continue to sin, you continue to fall, there's guilt, there's shame. And sometimes you look and go, no, all I've been doing since I've become a Christian is walk a trail of tears. It's full of pain and suffering. And all you guys keep telling me, if I'll just believe in Jesus, the rainbows there should be unicorns, rainbows, and Skittles. And it doesn't work that way. And so then you get discouraged, despondent, and you begin to deconstruct and think 5 seconds about becoming an atheist. But if you say that, the church will be like, oh, how dare you? Everything's perfect. Well, you continue to believe that. And when you're broken and bloodied and filled with guilt, shame, failure, well, guess what many of those people do? They don't stay within Christianity. Or, well, maybe say it this way. They may stay within Christianity. They will not stay within the church because they get tired of the 24/7 info commercial. The Psalms show people weeping. They show people crying. I mean, how many verses have we looked at so far? In the first category, we have what? Literal tears. We have, and this is verses that literally say the word tears, and I think are describing literal tears. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 passages. And then when we come to weeping, weeping and wept, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So already we're developing a pretty thorough map, and these are verses that appear throughout the Psalms. There's weeping, there's pain, there's suffering. That's a reality. The map maps it out. The map screams the reality. You see, weeping and tears are not condemned in Scripture. If you want to say anything, maybe they're sanctified as a part of the human condition waiting redemption. We are going to cry. We're going to weep. We're going to sin. We're going to fail. We're going to be imperfect all the way until redemption, until glorification. Christianity is not the escaping the tears, not in this life. It's the sanctifying of the tears and setting them apart, letting us know that for now we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but we will come out on the other end to glorification. And I know that sounds like a more defeatist kind of Christianity. I know it goes against everything you've been taught, because everything you've been taught is that Christianity is going to make everything perfect. It doesn't. It stinking doesn't. It doesn't make you perfect. Think of all the tears in your life. Think of all the weeping and the pain and the sorrow and the depression and the suffering. Now, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but that's okay, because we've already just mapped out that entire section. We've mapped out all the literal tears. We've mapped out weeping, and wept. The third section is going to be crying and crying out. All right, this is like prayer language, and we have a lot of verses there, so there's no way I can cover them now. So we can take a little time to have this discussion, all right? So I want you to think about, when you think about tears, wept, weeping, when you think about all of that, wept, all of the different variations that I gave you, weeping, weeping, and wept. I keep forgetting all three. When you think about all of these, think about your life. Think about all the things that's led to tears, weeping, pain, crying out, late nights, not being able to sleep and just crying your heart out. Think about it. A good portion of those tears are probably the result of a couple of things. One, some kind of physical pain, which will be sickness, injury, something along those lines, right? Where you're crying out because of something you're going through. It could be a mental health issue. That's a sickness. That's a disease. It could be physical. It could be an accident, a broken bone, or anything along those lines. Think about all the tears you've cried there. And then I think there's two other categories. They are there because of what's been done to you by other people, by what other people have done to you. Right? They lied about you. They gossiped. They hurt you. They, for whatever reason, they've done this to you or this to you. Just, it's someone else's actions. And many of those actions done to you is because those people who did those things to you are not perfect. They failed. It may be their own imperfection and their own sin. So that means you're weeping because of pain, suffering, sickness, tragedy, or an accident, that kind of thing. Or you're weeping because of actions done by someone else that reflect that they are sinners. They are fallen. They have a sinful nature, they're selfish, they're self-seeking, they're whatever the case may be. It shows the imperfection in other people. And then the third reason you may be crying is because of your own imperfection, your own sin, your own guilt, your own shame, and your own struggles. And then you got to live with that guilt and that shame of your own failure. Those are three major categories of why you weep. Well, what's the promise of eternity? Well, there's not going to be any more suffering. You're going to have a glorified body. So there's not going to be any more pain. I'm not going to be any more suffering. There's not going to be any more tears because of that. Well, what else does eternity guarantee? Well, there's not going to be any more sin. So that means other people aren't going to have sin in order to hurt you, and you're not going to have sin, and you're not going to have any guilt or shame because you're failing, and because all your sin's going to be washed away, and you're going to be made like he is. So eternity is the ultimate. Those three major categories are all taken care of in eternity. But the church wants to reach up to eternity, say, no. There doesn't have to be tears now. Because they almost make it sound like, well, why should you sin? I mean, God is there to help you. God's there to give you strength. God is the one that you're empowered by the Spirit of God. You can be obedient. I mean, this stuff is preached constantly. Well, then why do you sin? Why? And if all the Christians you know, all the people who put faith in Christ, why have you ever been hurt by other professing Christians? They have the Holy Spirit. They don't have to be making any mistakes. They don't need to be messing up. Demand perfection from them. Demand perfection from yourself. And if God is there helping you and protecting you, like we say, then there shouldn't be. Why is there any pain, disease, sickness? Why do you fall? Why do you get hurt? God should be there to fix everything. God should just fix stinking everything, but he doesn't. And the Psalm shows people walking this life who believe in God, who they fail, they fall, they hurt other people hurt them, and they get hurt, and they suffer, and they die. Because life is not, the Christian faith is not the escape of the trail of tears. The Christian life is faith in God as you walk the trail of tears. It's not the removal of tears in this life. It's the hope of the removal of tears in the morning. So if I go to Psalm chapter 30, verse 5, and the second section in our map, for his anger endureth but a moment, and his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Now, in light of eternity, our weeping is only a night. It only lasts for a night in light of eternity. Because I don't care if I'm 30, if I live to be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, that's nothing compared to eternity. So weeping lasts for a night. Joy comes in the morning, and it endures because it's eternity. That's our hope, right? If we go to Psalm 126. If we go to Psalm 126. Verse 6. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. Again, it's this transformation. You go out, you go forth weeping, you come again with rejoicing. We go forth weeping. Man is born into a fallen world. We're born in a world where there's going to be trial, tribulation, pain, suffering, disease. Look, everyone, unless Jesus comes back, everyone's dying. And I'm sorry to say this, death is ugly. Death is painful. Go get a job in the medical world and you'll see this horrific side of death. It's horrible. It's painful. It's tragic. It's humiliating. It's dehumanizing in many ways. So already now everyone's going to cross that unless Jesus comes back. So there's already pain built in. And then just in life, there's emotional pain, relationship pain, failure. Just life is filled with pain. It never stinking ends, it seems, ever. And some people endure more and some less. Why? That's $1 million question. Why does some people's life, their trail of tears is like, what is that? It's for some ridiculous level you can't even imagine. Someone else's trail of tears, it looks, well, pretty insignificant to that. Now, you can never judge your trail with someone else's trail because your trail is your own. But the point is, every trail has tears. So we all go forth weeping because we're brought forth into this world. There's going to be trial. There's going to be tribulation. And that trial and tribulation, 3 basic categories: physical pain, sickness, disease, accident, right? That's never going away until eternity. Just don't even think that look, you can go hang out with all the charismatics in the world and they can claim all the healings and all the resurrections and all the nonsense. Just watch their church. I mean, look, I worked with way too many charismatics who claimed all of that nonsense. And guess what they did? They needed medical appointments. And I would get so tired. I worked in the medical world. You don't need a stinking medical appointment. Just claim your healing and get out of here and leave the appointments open for other people. You're in church on Sunday. Oh, Jesus guarantees healing. And then now you're here sick and hurt or worried about this disease. Stop it. They know deep down. It's just, but they want to believe that heaven enters in. We know, look, it's too easy to prove that clearly it's not happening. All around us, there are hospitals, there's diseases, there's graveyards, there's death, there's sickness, there's pain, there's you just know it. It's one of the most clearly, easily things to demonstrate. So if that is actually saved for eternity, all right, now let's look now at the other two causes of tears and of weeping. Sin, failure, either done to you or done by yourself. Now, if God was removing that sinful nature and removing that and actually assisting us so that we can say no to sin and yes to God, then there should be basically no sin, at least in all the people who claim to be Christians. So that means you could escape. All we would have to do is get away from the bad world, just live amongst Christians, and it would be peace and tranquility and harmony. But Christian marriages fight, yell, scream, divorce, fall apart, broken this, bitterness, anger, resentment. Oh, you don't believe that? Yeah. Why is there so many Christian counselors out there? Why are there so many Christian counselors out there? Why? Because in many cases, their clientele happen to be, I don't know, Christians who seem to have all kinds of problems. That goes back to the physical disease and mental health problems. But why are they there sometimes? Because of relationship problems. Well, why are there relationship problems between Christians? Why? You've got God helping you. I've got God helping me. You think between the help God is giving you and the help God is giving me, our relationship should be basically perfect. I mean, God is helping both of us. Right? Why do churches split? Why do church members do underhanded things to get rid of pastors or make a pastor's life miserable and go after his family? Why is there a lack of forgiveness amongst Christians? I mean, we can go on and on and on and on and on and on. So guess what? That seems to indicate that the healing promises is for glorification. And that seems to promise that a lot of the things Christians claim, those promises have to be for eternity because we don't see the reality of them now. What do we see the reality of now? Pain, suffering, death, a lot of mental health issues. That's why there's Christian counselors everywhere. All right. And we see broken relationships. We see failure. We see sin. We see bitterness. We see anger. We see wrath. We see resentment. We see backbiting, gossip, slander, lying. Maybe all the weeping and all the tears in the Psalms are there to go, hey, shh, stop. It's telling you there's a reality that nobody in the church wants to admit because the church is too busy selling and promising something that it cannot deliver now because it's to be delivered when we are delivered from this veil of flesh. And that's called glorification, where we get a glorified body. And the sinful nature, gone. Okay, now there's not going to be any more sin. Oh, glorified body, no more sickness, no more pain, no more accidents. Okay, delivered. Oh, no more death because now we won't die. Okay, all right. Everybody wants heaven on earth. Now, I'll call that my hypotheses. Now, I've given you two categories. Literal tears, and I've given you those references, Psalm 6:6, Psalm 39:12, Psalm 42:3, Psalm 56:8, Psalm 8, chapter 80, verse 5, Psalm 116, verse 8, Psalm 126, verses 5 through 6. All right. And even at the end of the literal tears, what did we read? Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. That same redemptive idea. You're going to sow in tears, but you're ultimately going to reap in joy. The same concept is there in the Psalms. You're seeing, even in our mapping, we're starting to see something. There's this constant, like, here's the one, but there's the promise of the other. We want the promise of the other in the now, and I think the promise for the other is ultimately in glory. But you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. Then we came to the weeping passages, which is Psalm chapter 30, verse 5, which begins with weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. And then we went Psalm 30, verse 5, Psalm 6:6, Psalm 69:10, Psalm 102:9, Psalm 126:6. He who goes out weeping, right? Who goes forth weeping, bearing precious seed, will doubtless come again with rejoicing. Now, all of these passages have very much historical and contextual settings. I by no means think I'm ignoring that right now. We're just mapping them out. I'm trying not to expound them, but I'm starting to see a concept here, and I think it's important. But they do demonstrate already a little bit of this contrast between here's the weeping, here's the tears, but here's the joy. And I'm putting forth the argument that the church tries to take the promise of joy and put it in the now. And I think in many cases we're misrepresenting, because we know the three major causes for weeping and tears. And if I'm missing one, you let me know. Pain, suffering, disease, accident. We can put death there. Okay. All right. That's just, we know that life is filled. Think of all the tears. And then the actions of others to you, which are sinful, hurtful, painful, right? And then your own failure and your own sin. And the first category would also cover mental health issues as well. Now, in the next section, we're going to call it crying and crying out. And these Psalms frequently use the words like cry, cried, crying. And this is more like a prayer, kind of like crying out in suffering. We'll call these vocal tears. The next section is going to be crying, crying out. These are vocal tears more than, it's like crying out. It's like a scream of pain, more so than a literal tear coming down your face in most cases. All right, man. Now, guess what happened here? I started this episode and my brain was, okay, I don't even know if I should be starting it right now. This should be a late night episode. I should try to handle this in do I handle it in an emotional way? But it also needs to be academic because we're trying to map this out. How should I do this? And I wasn't 100% sure. Next thing I know, the music is playing. The next thing I know, this is playing. All right? And it's my own fault because I went ahead and hit play, but I hit start streaming and then I hit this.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central podcast, making theology central.
And before I know it, boom, I'm live. And I got to give my introduction. And which way do I go? Which way do I go? I wasn't truly settled in my brain. I wasn't. And sometimes life, doesn't give you a lot of opportunities. You do something and then boom, it's there. And then, well, whatever happens. And so then what do I do? Well, then immediately I kind of stumble over some of my words. I don't get things correctly. How do I what do I do? Do I go through a more emotional approach? Do I go in a more academic approach? I'm kind of caught in between. Okay, but here I am. I can't do anything about it. I mean, I could have stopped. The one thing about a broadcast is I could have stopped it and said, you know what? I apologize if you're listening live. I'm going to start over. I could have taken a minute, got my, bearings, and then done it in a correct way. And it would have come across perfect. And it would have come across, well, not perfect. It would have come across more polished, more professional, and it would have followed a very specific way of thinking. And I also knew that when I went into this episode, what I needed to do was this needed to be hardcore, just mapping. Here are the verses, the end, goodbye, right? But what happened? I messed up at the beginning. Everything kind of messed up, stumbled, was going caught between two ideas. Next thing you know, we're to the mapping. I start the mapping. I know the mapping is short, right? I know there's only a few verses. I could get through the mapping in just a few minutes. So I look over and I'm like, man, this is not even going to go 20 minutes. And I'm like, but then I start noticing some patterns in the mapping, right? I start noticing some patterns, right? I kind of see this, from sorrow to joy. Okay. And so then next thing you know, what do I start? I stop mapping and I kind of start theorizing. I start coming up with my own hypotheses and I start thinking. And so now here I am at the end, and guess all I can do now? I can just simply regret that I did this episode because it didn't go the way I wanted it to go. Is that not how life works? And you know what that leads to? That leads to frustration. That leads to irritation. So I'm going to be bothered. Who knows? I may be bothered all night about it. I may be mad. Now, I don't know if I'm going to actually cry. Okay, I'm not saying that, but I'm going to be frustrated. I'm not worried, but just irritated. Going to be mad at myself. You messed up. You wanted this series to be so perfect. You wanted it to be perfect, right? Because you really wanted to speak to people who find themselves weeping in tears and find themselves in the darkness of life, walking that trail of tears. You wanted to get this right so it could be it could resound with people. But what did you do in episode 2? You jacked it all up and you messed it up. So you probably should delete it and do it again. What are you doing? I want to hit myself across the face and say, get it right next time. Because when you mess it up, you mess it up. Can I do it again? The one great thing about podcasting, I could delete it and do it again. But see, then if I do that, then I'll be going, you're not being real, right? You're being fake because you're going to delete it and put up a front so that it sounds so good. Oh, it'll be for good broadcasting, but it won't be authentic and you'll always know it. But at least you get a do-over. But then, will that reflect life? No, that does not reflect life. You don't get a do-over. You don't get a second chance. You do things don't go quite the way you thought. You had good motivation. Things fall apart. And then, boom, there's consequences and there's life. And then sometimes that consequence and those pain, that can be filled with sorrow and weeping. And this is just going to be filled with frustration and irritation, probably some discouragement. Probably won't get to the level of depression. I'll just know that episode 2 is always going to be trash. But maybe episode 3, I'll get it right. But then maybe episode 3. But you know what? I know it sounds ridiculous. Maybe it's my own self-preservation kicking in, but I do want it to kind of reflect reality. Life doesn't go right. It never goes perfect. And it's always filled with pain, suffering, trial, and disappointment and discouragement. It's never going to be perfect. No, you may get some great days or some great weeks or some great months. Maybe you've even had some great years. Maybe you even had a great decade. Well, that's wonderful that you did. Not everyone is guaranteed that. A trail of tears, of imperfection. That's what life is made up of. Life is having faith in a perfect God as you come to the realization of your never-ending imperfections. And you have to walk in light of those imperfections, and you have to walk in the world that is very imperfect, and it's filled with sickness, disease, pain, suffering, death, accident, mental health issues. And the actions of others, whether forgive, whether their unforgiveness, their bitterness towards you, their own resentment, their whatever they have for you, and their own sin towards you. And then you have your own failure and your own sin towards them and your own failure towards them, your own mistakes, whether you hurt others or whether you hurt yourself. Everybody lives with guilt, resentment, regret. And then you get the church going, hey, guys, become a Christian and everything's going to be perfect. Now, many churches will say, I'm not saying everything's going to be perfect, but just remember this. When you became a Christian, practically speaking, you became a new creation. Old things are passed away. All things have become new. Well, if everyone's a new creature, the old is gone and everything is new, then everyone should be perfect. Hey, God is there to give you strength. He's there to help you. He's there to lift you up. He's to hold you. He's to do this and to do that. And if you take everything God is supposedly doing for you right now, then you should look at life and go, well, I should just basically be perfect. I should basically be walking on water at this point in time. I should basically be able to part the Red Sea, call down fire from heaven. I could make it rain. I should be able to do everything because God is supposedly doing all of these things through me. Well, I mean, we're not saying that. And then they'll always try to backtrack. But the point is, if you take all the things that claiming to be taking place, and maybe the reality is, it's just like with disease, suffering, and death. That's a part of this life. And the promise of the redeeming of that is in glorification. And maybe, just like with sin, nobody is sinless. So obviously sin is a part of this life. And if sin is a part of this life, pain and suffering is going to result. Done to you, done to yourself, and done to others. Oh. I'm so frustrated now. See, all of this was supposed to be saved after the map was complete. I had such a good idea. It was just supposed to wait a little bit longer and it was going to be perfect, right? Just wait. If you'll I'm going to do it at this point in time and it'll be perfect. And well, nothing ever is. So literal, do you have your maps? Okay. I know at this point you threw your map out and like, this guy's an idiot. I don't even care about the map. I understand. Your map, literal tears, we'll just call it literal tears. And I mean that two different ways. The passages are talking about literal tears, but they actually use the word tears. I didn't make that clear in part one. And then our category two is weeping, the human response to distress. And these are verses that use the word weep, weeping, or wept. And then the next category is crying. And these are, we'll call them vocal tears. This is about crying out, cried. For example, Psalm 3:4, I cried aloud to the Lord and he answered me. That may involve tears, but it's more the tears expressed verbally, vocally. Man, all right. I don't know what else to say. If I sit here, I'm going to cry out myself. You're going to hear my vocal anguish, my vocal frustration. So what's best is I'll just hit stop, leave it here, upload it, and just say, well, it's a testimony of, and I know what you're thinking. It's just a podcast episode. Who cares if you get it right? I know. That's good for you. Congratulations. I'm glad it does not bother you. And there's probably things that bother you that I'm like, what are you worried about? What's the big, get over it. We all have those things, don't we? Because, well, maybe because we're not perfect in so many ways, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, because we're not perfect. And that imperfection clings to a faith in a perfect God. And we have to walk in this imperfection in the meantime. I know. It's a radically different picture than the Christianity you're probably going to have preached to you on Sunday. I'll just argue that my Christianity that I'm trying to preach to you, I think is more real than the Christianity gets sold to you at your church's infomercial meetings that they have on Sundays. All right. God bless.